Welcome back to the MySalesDay podcast. And welcome back to Ryan Pacini. He and I first did a show last fall, and the conversation was so easy and so robust that I invited him back early this year. I wanted him back early in the year because I knew he had a lot to offer about self-appraisal and skills analysis. Now is the right time of the year to set good habits where sellers assess their performance and learn from skill application and results. As Ryan and I hit on in the show, self-appraisal is a sensitive subject because, of course, no seller wants their deal scrutinized, and even fewer sellers want their actions scrutinized. However, the top 10% of all sellers are those who are active and frequently assess what they're doing in front of customers and how their behaviors translate to results. I know you're going to enjoy the show, and it starts right now. Sales is hard, brutally hard, and it's messy. Welcome to My Sales Day, a podcast by sellers for sellers. I'm your host, Michael Hess, and it's my job to make sales less messy for you and make sure that by listening to this show, you get skill ideas and action items to help your sales career. You're gonna get some hugs too. Yes, hugs. You need support, and you don't often get it from inside your org. And you certainly don't get it from the street. I aim to make your time here educational, inspirational, and actionable. So let's get into it. Ryan Pacini, welcome back to the My Sales Day podcast. How are you today, Ryan?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Michael. I'm thrilled to be back.
Good. The operative word is back. Ryan was on one of my very first podcasts last fall, and we had so much fun doing that. I think it was in October. We had so much fun doing it. I wanted to get you back on, especially when you replied to me that you wanted to talk about how sellers need to be expert at analyzing their selling behaviors. That's not normally one of the skills that any of my guests want to talk about, mostly because there's not a lot of sellers who want to do that. Sellers, of course, are just hard chargers. Just go to the next, and nobody really wants to stop and look in the mirror. But we know that's a skill, and I was delighted when you said you wanted to talk about that. So kudos to you.
Thanks, Michael. I think it's a critical skill. If you don't know yourself, it's hard to know your customer. So it's a great place to think about just your own personal fulfillment, but how it also impacts your wallet as well. So it's has double the value than other skills in some capacity.
Totally. So before we talk about self-appraisal, aka performance management, and a few other skill topics that we'll get into, I want to hear about your new role at .cms. You got a promotion recently, so tell us briefly, what are you now doing? What's different? And how's it going?
Yeah, I'm thrilled. So I stepped into the role of CRO at .cms effective January 1st, which I'm just super thankful for the opportunity. My journey has been on both the sales and marketing side of things, and but at heart, I'm a seller. And when I went into marketing, I realized in many ways it's selling before the deal happens, and it's selling one to many. And so in this new role, I oversee sales, direct sales, marketing, channel partnerships, and growth with our existing customers. So it's been a fun ride so far. I have an amazing team of owners of each of those disciplines, and we're excited for a big fiscal year 26.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What does the new role, since this is a show about skills, what does the new role do to make you think about the skills you have to learn to be better at your job and the skills you have to teach for this team?
I think the first skill is, we're going to talk about, doing an assessment of your kind of where you are. I think the first thing I realized as I was stepping into this role and doing an evaluation of my skills over the course of the holiday season was there were things about each discipline that I didn't know. And so having that realization that those skills were not in my toolbox yet, like for example, in marketing, a deep understanding of demand generation, right? In channel partnerships, how to structure reseller agreements or incentive programs. In sales, there were some of the parts of sales operation, revenue operations, as well as enhancements to how you run deal cycles that were best practices from maybe different sectors that I wasn't aware of. So the first thing was just taking an honest look at what those skills were. Also, the other thing I will say is one of the big skills that came to the forefront was leadership and understanding how to motivate, how to support, and how to get the most productivity out of the members of your team. And so I realized that was a skill that was going to be critical, because as I looked at the numbers, I looked at the volume of work streams. As someone who loves to get their hands on the keyboard and do the work themselves, I realized we could not meet our goals unless my team was empowered to meet their goals. And so figuring out how to support, how to grow, and how to ensure that they met their goals, leadership was the one that came to the forefront.
Nice. Congratulations
Thank
again.
you.
And there's nothing like being thrust into a big senior leadership role to make you think about skills. You know, most sellers go through life and they don't think about the application of skills. This, in part, is why MySalesDay exists, both in newsletter form and in this podcast, is to raise awareness that skill application equals results or not, which I think is a good segue to what we're going to talk about with performance management. I want to turn this over to you a little bit, because that's how we prepped for this show. I said, what do you want to talk about, as I mentioned? And you came back with, well, I really want to dive into, the self-appraisal and what that means into changing behaviors and taking action. Obviously, you quoted a particular post. Why don't we talk about that post, and we'll briefly reference it, and that can propel us into a conversation.
Yeah, that post is, without proper self-evaluation, failure is inevitable, right? And
that was the quote. That was the quote.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was the quote from the post, and that just landed with me really deeply. And here's the reason why: as a young seller, and maybe your first or second role, you get overwhelmed when someone starts to scrutinize your deals, right? It feels jarring. It feels like a personal attack. As you get into the mid stage of selling, you realize that there's going to be holes in everyone's deal. And the more feedback you get on your deals, the higher probability that you have to win those deals. So there's more receptivity to feedback on your deals. Now, when you get into the third stage of selling and really kind of round out your skill set, you are willing to look at your own personal places where you have strength and areas for growth. And the reason for that is because that is also going to contribute to your productivity. If you are a seller who is very, very good at relationships, but you're not really great on product knowledge, right? The probability of you closing deals is lower than someone who's great at product knowledge and relationships. And so being able to take a look at yourself to round out your skills is what is going to make you the most productive seller. But that is a very challenging thing for most sellers to do. Here is where the rub is. Most sellers have egos, let's be honest. Most sellers know that they have a skill. But with that ego has to come a level of humility in order to grow. And so that means looking at yourself, which is often the last thing we want to do. We're okay to look at our deals. It's not that personal. But when it comes to looking at ourselves, that's when it starts to become problematic. But the opportunity for growth there is so much greater in some cases as you evolve in your sales career.
It really does relate to a little bit of EI, and that's not to say that sellers who don't have a high level of EI can't be successful, or they can't go through some sort of protocol that elevates a scrutiny process through a deal. But we're talking about behaviors. We're talking about actions. And the post that you're referring to was last December. We are taping this in mid-January 2026. It was specifically December 16, and the subject line, and I'm referencing the post specifically from the newsletter, not because I'm super proud of it, given I write everything in the newsletter, but because I just think it bears mentioning for context here. The subject line was week 50. Again, this is Tuesday, December 16, not long ago.
Yep.
Week 50. How was your year? But it was the preview line, because I'm limited to space in some of these titles. It was the preview line that I thought captures this whole essence. The preview line was, your commission doesn't reveal the truth about your 2025. And in the actual post, I write, your 25 revenue performance is locked in by now. Again, this was mid-December. But what about your skill performance? Can you tie your improvement against objection handling this year to your big win on the Acme account? I believe one of the greatest strengths of all sellers is when they look at cause and effect. And there are 84 different subjects that I cover on a yearly basis in the MySalesDay newsletter. But it's a 2-minute read. I can't go deep, which is partly why this podcast exists, which is to allow us to extrapolate. It's hard to convey the issue on what self-appraisal means. So for you, getting smart enough and good enough to be a CRO, how did you look at the self-appraisal process and swallow that pill on, oh God, I really screwed that up and I keep screwing that up? When did you get smarter in your career? At what stage about, no, I need to appraise everything that I do on all these meetings all the time?
It's a great question. And I think it is a journey to get to a place where you've mastered this skill of essentially having humility to look at where you are in your journey and where your blind spots are. So I don't think it's necessarily an aha moment. But for me, I had some life circumstances, which I won't go into. They were personal. But it caused me to find my own self-worth, which is sort of existential. It's outside of selling. And it helped me realize that feedback is a gift, right? And feedback is a gift that nothing is off the table, because you don't have to take every piece of feedback to heart. It's just a data point for you to look at and decide what to do with. And so when you can get to that point, you can take the feedback. It doesn't sting for long, and then you can objectively look at it and say, what do I want to take that is going to improve my skill? And so, but if you can only take a portion of the feedback, if there are parts of you that are blocked off from taking that feedback, you might be missing that golden nugget. So the first piece is getting to a place where you can accept feedback as a gift, not as a personal insult. And that's a journey for folks that's kind of existential, but it's critical. And from there, once you see the fruit of that and the ego gets removed from it, then you have the opportunity to let it pour in more and more. So getting through the first few times when it really stings, seeing the fruit of it, it opens up a gateway of opportunity.
Mm-hmm. How do we help the listener out there who is nodding their head up and down saying, yeah, of course, simple, got it, but they don't have a manager like Ryan Pacini?
Yep.
They don't have somebody who is proactive in saying, hey, Sue, whatever your rep's name is, let's sit down. There were some things I saw in that Zoom and that Google Meets or in that face-to-face, I hope, that I want to talk about. Many of the listeners don't have that. So what do?
I'm actually going to pull something out that you said that I want to highlight,
okay,
which is hopefully face-to-face.
Yeah.
And the reason I want to pull that out is because I think that's when you learn the most in terms of yourself and your feedback, is being in front of someone, engaging with them. And part of it, what they can do is they can do a retro on themselves. They can do a retro on the call. They can, and that's one place to start, is make it part of your process to do a retro, right? Because you will start to see patterns. Everyone has gone call recordings. Everyone has recording software. And you can even use prompts in that software to give you a sense of what continues to come up. The second thing is journal. Write down, make an inventory list for yourself. And if you're 5, 6, 7 years into your sales career and you've had 2, 3 managers who you valued, even if you don't have one today, channel their thoughts of what they've said about you, of the feedback that you've heard. Because what you're going to find is themes. You're going to find themes, which is you're great at relationships. You missed steps in the process. You're pretty good at product knowledge, right? So you can find those things by doing a self-assessment, looking backward. The other thing is most sellers, we love to be at the top of the leaderboard. It's not always because of the money, it's because we love the validation.
Totally.
And part of the validation comes from mentors. So I would guess the vast majority of sellers have someone they look to and say, I respect that person, or someone like Michael Hess that I would say the same, like, Michael, what do you think about this? And that those people are a great place to start because they often see things that are good and challenging that you don't see about yourself. That's the other point, Michael. Sorry, I know I'm going to rant, but you can tell I care a lot about this. Is when you go through the inventory, this is really critical of your skills and what you're good at and what you're not good at. Don't glance over the good ones. Look at them.
Yeah.
Sit with them. Yeah. Enjoy them. And then also know where your blind spots are and work on them. But make sure it's balanced too.
There's a feedback framework that Google teaches its managers that is very effective, and it does start with positive reinforcement first. I know because I taught this framework to many Google managers when I did some assignments for them, and I saw how it unleashed the potential in the manager and unlocked new revelations in the conversation with the seller that was phenomenally beneficial to the seller, mostly because they're trying to get better. And it's called a 2x2 framework, and it goes like this. The manager, if they're in a interaction with their seller, they basically, after the meeting, sit down with the seller and they start with this. Are you ready for some feedback? And that's a very important cue where the manager signals to the seller that this is a time to assess actions and behaviors. And the manager starts by inviting the seller to answer the question, what do you think you did right on that sales call in that meeting? What do you think you did positive? Okay. One thing, limit it to one thing. And then the manager listens and the seller explains that. And then the next follow-up question by the manager is, now answer the question, what's the one thing that you could have or will want to change the next time? And it forces the seller, of course, to just pick, again, one thing on what they would modify. And the one thing is key. Now, you get somebody like a Dia Marchione, who you and I know very well, and we referenced even in the first podcast. Dia was so driving of herself, she would want to contribute 15 things on what she could do better. It's like, no, it's not about that. That's what makes her great, but for most people, it's just one thing. And then the manager, the 2x2 framework comes in where the manager then shifts over into the role of participant and says, here's what I think you did really well in that meeting, really strong, a good action, a good skill application. And then here's what I think you need to work on.
Yep.
The question that I asked a moment ago, though, is for the listener out there, and there's two types of listeners I want to address this to. The listener who doesn't think they can get that depth of a conversation with their manager because they either think their manager isn't capable, or number two, the seller who is so grizzled and tenured that they don't think they have to play that game and they don't think they have to do this self-analysis anymore. Are you managing anyone like that right now? I guess you might be careful in admitting that.
I'm actually not. The main seller I'm thinking of is tremendous in this category. But I actually, if you're okay, I want to comment on two things you said, and then I'm going to answer your question. Yeah. The first thing is, coming on MySalesDay, I know my role was to provide some insight, but I am taking that as something I would love to use with my team. The second point I want to make, I think it's very
which what? I'm sorry.
the
What?
one and
The two
one,
by two.
the 1 point, the 2x2
The
that
two.
you
Yeah,
just
it's called
talked
the
about.
2x2 feedback framework. Yeah.
I absolutely, I love it.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is the consistency of feedback for yourself, and if you're going to do it with your leader. The reason is, we all know as sellers how we feel. If we're in a quarter that we're at 105%, we've got a month left, and we're giving ourselves feedback. Versus if we're in a quarter and we're at 15% and we've got a month left. So we have to look at the feedback in over a period of time to pull the trends, not the feelings in a certain moment in time.
Right.
Because as sellers, we're always riding waves. Now, as you get further along in your career, you focus on inputs, but as you're learning these things, you're riding waves. And so to balance your own personal assessment, it's important that you have the right duration. Okay.
And I would add to the manager or to the seller out there who doesn't think they can approach their manager, I would say, don't assume that. Let your manager surprise you. Yes, the manager should be proactive in this type of a leadership or coaching kind of method, but the fact of the matter is these days managers are squeezed and they just haven't been taught, right? So they don't know about things like, let's appraise your performance, because those incremental conversations over time, to your point, they do reveal themes and signals that drive behavior modification in a positive way.
100%.
Go to your manager anyway.
Yep.
And say, how am I doing? How am I doing with skills?
Yep.
What do you see?
100%.
And if the manager can't answer that question, then the manager is not participating enough in some of the shared selling activities. And because, let's face it, most of the listeners right now are selling through video.
Yep.
What does it take to put an extra square on the screen taken up by the manager who listens, who's spectating? So the manager needs to get, but the seller needs to say, "Hey, manager, I need your feedback. I'm always trying to grow. I'm always trying to learn, but I can't do it while I'm trying to run a meeting and take care of the questions and get our value prop out there. I need somebody to be a third party who watches and observes."
I couldn't agree more. I was going to answer the second part of your question, because as a seller, I missed one of the primary rules was actually answer the question you're being asked. The second part of your question is, if you're a sales leader and you have a rep who is kind of stuck in their ways, you have to also understand the dynamics of that rep. And so, for example, that rep might be hyper competitive, and if they're at 80% of their number and there's 3 reps ahead of them, and they think they're good enough and they're going to get to their number, part of it is helping them understand, hey, you would use, an executive sponsor in a deal. You would use an incentive in a deal to get it inside. This is another tool in your toolkit to improve your win rates. These people who are ahead of you on the leaderboard, they're doing this and their win rates are higher than yours, And so you have to, in some cases, it's folks will gravitate towards it because they know it's going to improve their numbers and they're going to grow personally. And so that's the least path of resistance, and that's what you hope for. But some sellers who kill it, they have big egos and they don't want this. But if you put it in the framework of, hey, it's going to put you on top, it's going to benefit you, it's going to help you improve your close rates, then there might be a bit more openness to it. It's really about how I think quite a bit of it's how it's positioned. And then the last piece I'll say is, if they're at 110% of their number, then it's up to you as a sales leader to say, is this critical to put on them? Is this part of the culture that you're building, or is this their operating model? And it's a skill that you're going to work on with them over time, right? It might not be an immediate win. It's something that they have to get to, but it might be a little bit of a longer run rate than others.
Most definitely, and especially for the guy who is putting up a 110% or the woman who's doing 115%, they're sitting back saying, hey, my you-know-what doesn't stink right now, and I got the magic touch. Well, if you're at one, when I was a sales manager, I never really looked at a number in any given one period as the absolute representation of that person's skills or abilities.
Yep.
Maybe they're at 110, but they should be at 150 just on how things have set up for them. So I actually think that's a good time to go have an open-hearted conversation and say, you're really killing it this quarter, and I'm really excited because you're going to get a good check. But let's get back to the question from December 16th. What are you learning?
Yep.
What are you learning about how your skill application is driving, again, the causation thing here, is driving the results? And now, a word from our sponsor. What a coincidence! Today's MySalesDay podcast sponsor is the MySalesDay newsletter. If you're enjoying the show and you want frequent, directional, and inspirational selling ideas, then the MySalesDay newsletter is for you. If I told you that going to the skills gym each day would cost you only 2 minutes of attention, you would sign up in a second. That's the premise of the newsletter. Early each morning, a punchy, action-oriented skill reco comes to your box, focusing you for the day. Who doesn't have 2 minutes to work on their skill development and career growth? The risk of not subscribing to MySalesDay might seem insignificant until you imagine your competitors reading it. Get an edge. Put in the time. Head to mysalesday.io after this show. Or heck, why wait? Pause the show, head over to mysalesday.io and subscribe. Better habits, better selling.
Yep.
Now, as you know, because you're a fan of the newsletter, and maybe some people who are listening don't read the newsletter, so I will explain that it's a 4-section newsletter. We start with a quote. We have the skill summary. We have the do, which is the action item, and then we have oomph, which is basically a clip of a fun movie or something that reinforces the theme, or a TED Talk, what have you. The do for that December 16 post, I think, adds to the list on what we can coach our sellers to do. And it's basically, as prescribed in that newsletter post, sit down and look at your top 5 accounts for that year. This, of course, was written in mid-December, as I've established. And in one column, put your top 5 accounts, your biggest yield. And then in column B, C, and D, or however you want to do it, list all the skills that you used to drive the revenue on those particular accounts. Because now, that exercise might sound like, really? What's that going to do? I'll tell you what it's going to do. It's going to raise awareness of the things that you're good at, which, again, slap yourself on the back, and hopefully your manager sees that too, but also the things you need to work on. What is not posted by you on that list is as revealing as the things that you do put on that list. And of course, it could be everything from, boy, I really handled objections well on this one. I saved that account from going south. And all of a sudden now they're a top 5 for this year. And it was all because I turned them around on some perception issue, or they had some preconceived notions about how they could use my product, my service, which wasn't entirely true. So I expanded their vision on that. But when you get in the habit of aligning production on an account basis with skills, now I think that self-analysis becomes both macro and micro in its value to you.
So, Michael, I will give your talk track there a 7 out of 10, and here's the reason why. I'm very, I remember reading that post from the 16th and thinking I was very disappointed in you for one major reason, which is when I worked on your team, you would not. And I was in a room. It was me, Stephen Flink, Brian McFarland. Trying to think who else was in there. And you said, whether we win or lose a deal, something along the lines, whether we win or lose a deal, I want the same debrief afterwards. And meaning,
What did you think I was?
You would not let us off the hook if we lost a deal unless we had a debrief with the potential buyer on why we lost, what we could have done better. And so why I gave you a 7 out of 10 is because the other 3 points are the 5 biggest deals, not that you won, the 5 biggest deals that you lost. And what was missing in those deals, because that will reveal the gaps in your skill set. And so that to me that was what I would add to that exercise. I remember I wanted to tell you that back in the day. I wanted that should be added to that exercise to be a complete seller, not a seller that's just patting yourself on the back.
Okay, so to defend myself, and by the way, I love it, and your memory is fantastic. To defend myself, I have to write a 2-minute read for those posts. I can't cover everything.
Well, it should have been the day after.
Yeah, no, you know what? That's true.
Jokes aside, though.
Thank you. And actually, to address that, in all reality, I make it a point to talk about closed lost 3 to 4 times a year in my sales day, which is where I pick up, hey, you got to know why you lost, and it is not to that point of us having the caucus. It's not acceptable for you to just walk away down towards the next opportunity.
It's a gold mine in the lost data. Yep.
What you learn basically tees you up for the next time.
100%.
Have we exhausted this one? Do we want to go further? I guess I remember what I wanted to chat with you about is on the show that we did in the fall, almost 6 months ago. You told that great anecdote about the woman on the buy side on the day a deal was almost or was due to get a signature. You called and said, "Let's go, contract due date." And she said, "Well, there's nobody." And this, I think you said it was a Friday at like 4 p.m. And she said, "Well, there's nobody here at the company to sign the contract." And you said, "Well, unfortunately, you therefore are not going to take advantage of the incentives that we put in place if you were should you sign today." And she tried to play hardball, and you played hardball, and you won. And I'll never forget that particular story because, first of all, it was an amazing negotiation tactic on calling somebody's bluff, reminding them of the deal terms, which I was very proud of you for doing, and holding your ground. And you admitted on that show, if anybody's listening and wants to hear the segment, go back and listen to our first show.
Yep.
It's on MySalesDay.io under the podcast section. It's a great, great show, not just for that anecdote, but it was very inspiring. But what that triggered with this type of performance management thread is the following. I think when we get to a late stage, I know when we get to a late stage in the funnel with a customer, we kind of stop performing the actions and the selling behaviors that got us to that stage where we think we're going to get the business. And we replace action with praying and hoping. And I hate that. My teaching is always, my encouragement is always, come up with reasons at the point where you think you're in that late stage in the funnel where the client is going off and they're thinking, or they say there's nothing else you can do right now. When I hear there's nothing else you can do right now, I don't hear those words. I say, what else can I do to sweeten the pot? What else can I do to get in front of you to talk about value? Because I'm worried that my competitor is swooping in at the last minute and they're doing something to steal mind share away from me in the buyer, in the buyer's mind. Talk to me about how your opinion on that, because I know you've got a different way of thinking about driving actions down towards the bottom of the funnel to the point where you get yes.
Yeah. I think it's where the best sellers rise to the top. There's no question about it, right? It's 2 minutes left and you got the ball in your hands, And so if that's the analogy you look at it as versus, hey, I've dropped my 35 in for the game on Michael Jordan and that's all I need to do because that's all I'm expected. That's not how he thinks. That's not how winners think. They think, one of Kobe Bryant's big, the press conference when I think they were up 3-0 in the NBA Finals, and they said, "Kobe, why aren't you smiling?" He says, "Job's not done." It's the same mentality for a seller, which is, I couldn't agree more with you than, okay, I've got the contract out. It's with the buyer. They're going to let me know. And that's all I can do. There's always more that you can do, because I think sometimes sellers, there's two things that they miss. The first thing is they think, what can I do? Not what can my team do? Not what can my CEO do? Not what can my engineer do? Not what can my head of client success do, right? And I'll come back to that in a second. The second thing is they think they have to ask most of the time. You said, what can I do to bring value? Well, I can only call them one more time. I call them every day. I've called her every day, the signer. Like, that's not how a strategic seller thinks, right? So let's carry forward in that bucket, which is not just an ask. You can send them an article. Let's say you're a software provider, right? You can send them an article about best practices for implementation, so they're ready to go right after you sign. You've hit their inbox every single day, so they don't forget about you then. You could send them a webinar on a topic that you know they care about, for, in my case, content strategy. Let's say throughout the sales process, you know that they love, again, basketball. Maybe you send them something in the mail, so you're always in front of them. You're top of mind with them all the time. So it doesn't always have to be an ask for the contract. And maybe sprinkled in there is, hey, remember, it's the end of the year. The terms are good through this date. Here's what they look like after. I know you're going to sign it by this date, but just so you have it in case you, however you play it out. But so that's one. And the other piece is, it's not just you selling, right? Sometimes a simple note that you say to your CEO or your CMO or your VP or whatever, can you draft me a note that says, hey, I'm really excited about the partnership with XYZ. Can you please give me a status? And you forward that note. That's not you selling, that's someone else asking, right? So there's so many different ways. It's a bit of a cop-out to say, hey, I've done everything I can. The best sellers are always thinking about the next move. And even if none of the moves are right, they've at least put 5 moves on the table that they can propose and discuss with their team to keep the deal moving. So you can tell I might be a little bit opinionated on that one.
No, that's where the classic de facto move by a seller that, if you remember when we worked together, I had outlawed and literally legislated out of our activities, and that is the just checking in email. Yeah.
As a CRO, if I get a quick question or checking in email, just delete.
And yet late stage funnel actions oftentimes lead with just checking in. How about this one? This is rather devious. I learned this a little bit after you and I worked together, which is, hey, Mr. Pacini, of course I don't call my prospects that, but hello, Ryan. I noticed something in the proposal that you're considering right now that I am able to sweeten. If you look on page 2, item 3, we had said we're going to do X, but in fact we can do X plus 50%. I know you're at the stage right now where you're considering whether you're going with us or not, but I wanted to rush this to you and make sure that you see and incorporate this into your decision. Now, some people have come back and they've said, that's cheap. That's a cheap trick. And some people have said they'll see right through that. I don't know. Sometimes I've used it to have success. And it's been something that I can easily manipulate as part of the offer. It's not, I'm not lowering their price by 10%. It's some sort of value add or something that I'm able to just boost. But I'm bringing value at that time when they're thinking, is it him or is it that person over there?
Yep.
Do you like that, or do you think it's a cheap trick?
I think the biggest word that you used is sometimes. Because you have to know the buyer. You have to know their reaction to that. You have to know the situation that they're in. But I would say, as a general rule of thumb, I like it. And I think if it's couched in, look, hey, you said this, I'm going to raise it by 50%. Yeah. I think this is what we had. I'm going to raise it by 50%. This is how I went to bat, and I think this is how it's going to help you meet your end objective. Yeah. It feels really good. It's like, hey, the message is sweetening the pot versus being disingenuous, and if it's presented that way, I think it's a tremendous tool.
And it's a preemptive negotiating approach that does apply to this day and age where negotiations aren't face to face. They're all through email, which puts the seller at a huge disadvantage, obviously. So that's good to put that context around it. All right, we'll wrap that in a bow. I just want to talk about that one more post that you brought to me and cover one more skill as quickly as possible in our last 5 minutes or so. You came to me nominating this subject, and I think it's really important at this time of the year. We record this in mid-January. This will probably hit, the show will probably hit the airwaves, the public airwaves, in a couple weeks. So it's still very important to talk about personal manifestos. This time of the year, resolutions are long gone. It's mid-January. You're either going to go to the gym or you're not, right? But manifestos are important, an important driver for sellers to codify what they believe in, which helps them in staying on top of their performance for 12 months of the year. What was it about that post that struck a nerve with you?
On a personal, let me talk quickly on a personal level, but then as directly as it relates to sales, because so many things in sales and life are tied together. On a personal level, often the fruit of what you're in search of comes after a set of actions. Whether it's it's teaching. For me, I have 3 girls, and it's being consistent with them on the things, the actions that they need to take until behavior is learned. So, for example, doing chores, skiing. I'm based in Colorado. Their dance routine. And so they'll get frustrated in the beginning, and I might get frustrated as we're starting a new habit, but the action, even if the feeling isn't there, then produces the result. And this one was so important to me. When I read it, it was so important to me because it's a lesson that I try to pass on in the age of all this new sales technology, all these methodologies, all this information that you can get, is something that I learned from you, which is sales is still, I know, I have to give you some plugs. Sales is still a numbers game, because when I was at Video Egg, I had a new territory, I had a new set of agencies, and I was grinding every day. And I don't know if you remember this, hopefully you don't, but do you know how much I closed in my first 11 months?
No.
0, Michael.
Oh.
But do you know how much I closed? Do you know how much I closed in month 13?
How much?
It was over $1.5 million in those 2 months. So, and that was a result of the consistent effort that I put in. So I could see it building. But in month 6, as a 25-year-old seller, I was panic struck. I was overwhelmed, but I had the encouragement of you and Brian to do the inputs, take the action. And in sales, let's be honest, the joy's in the journey, but happiness is in meeting your number. And in the days when you're up, it's easy to take action. In the days when you're down, it's harder to take action. But you learn that there's still math that goes into sales, which is you have to make connections with a certain number of people. A certain number of people have interest, and a certain number of people will buy. And in order to get to those numbers, there has to be action.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for reminding me that you struggled in the first year. And by the way, your story is shared by just about every seller. I mean, I didn't sell in, as I look back on my career, it's been that way any place I started, right?
Yep.
The reason I think the manifesto ties into that quote, again, the quote was for that post on January 2, action may not always bring happiness, but there is no happiness without action. And I use it as a setup for the manifesto because I just can't run my life any differently unless I have goals. But oftentimes, goals are not enough. Call goals per day, email outreach goals, pipeline goals, quota goals. It's not enough. I need a higher driving formula and a guidance system, and that's where manifestos kind of take over for me. I first started writing a personal manifesto about 20 years ago. And as I wrote in the skill section of that post, I'll be verbatim here, To be successful each year, you need to be disciplined. Being disciplined requires both a rigorous goal-setting protocol and a manifesto. Creating a manifesto codifies your commitment to who you are, what you do, and why you do it. I just find that I can set goals any day of the week, and it's pretty easy for me. I'm a Virgo, okay? Everything is cut and dry. I love spreadsheets, man.
Yep.
Give me a hammer. Where's the nail, right? Yep. But I need more. I need to believe. I need the reasons why I'm doing this. I need to believe in the values that drive it. And I know that for most of the readership and the listenership here, that this might not be something that they get to. They can barely get to the goal setting protocol and stay consistent with that. But I'm always managing towards a high level here. I'm always managing towards that 1 or 2 sellers out of 10 who are saying, I need that. I need to know why I'm here, why I'm doing this. And that's where manifestos help. So I'm glad you brought it up, especially this time of the year. Just wanted to give that plug for that post and to remind sellers out there that resolutions are important. They're made on 12/31, and you probably made some this year, and they're probably already broken. I think manifestos are better. Ryan, we're going to get you back to doing some of your revenue driving and management activities, but final thoughts on anything we talked about before I close it down here. Anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I think the skill that really jumped out at me. We talked a lot today, but the skill is the work of self-evaluation that I think can elevate a seller in a way that they can't see unless they start the journey. So the most important step is starting that journey, because it's hard to see what the fruit of that can be unless you get a taste, right? There are tweaks that you might make. You might make some more calls and get a few more opportunities. Those are incremental. I think this skill that we talked about today, why I was so passionate about it, is transformational, right? Because you're growing yourself in a way that's going to allow you to unlock more business too. So that's my final thought. Outside of that, hopefully I did a good enough job to make it to part 3. That was my main goal of this session for today. So
you did great. You did great. Simplistically, the whole notion of appraising your own skills and looking in the mirror is just basically, how can I learn and get better? Right?
Yep.
Pushing
Absolutely.
ourselves. The bigger context, of course, is, I think, also buried inside one important notion that we didn't touch on too much, which is you need thick skin to survive and to thrive in sales.
Yep.
Well, guess what? Analysis of your skills, either from your own personal, your hardest critic, which is you, or your manager, that's just going to keep building those calluses at the same time. So I think
100%.
There's deep context there. All right, we're going to cut Ryan Pacini loose so he can get back to his day job, but that means it's time for me to remind the listener why you joined the show today, but it's pretty obvious you did it because you're trying to be the best professional that you can be, even if it's a little thing that you picked up from Ryan today, or by reading the MySalesDay newsletter. It can make a huge difference in your selling, but your mind must stay open. Ryan, thank you for joining us, my friend. Great seeing you. Great talking about sales with you.
Always great to be with you, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. And for you and everyone, remember, better habits equal better selling. Outstanding.
It was good? Yeah. All right, good. It was fun. It was fun.
Thank you for listening to MySalesDay. It was great having you here. For more, listen to our other episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And while you're there, leave us a review. I care what you think. And because I'm a seller like you, I got thick skin, so I can take anything you got. You can also visit mysalesday.io to join our email list and community dedicated to sellers just like you. MySalesDay is a podcast by sellers for sellers. And if you got something out of today's episode, help out a friend by sharing this episode with them. My Sales Day is proudly produced in partnership with Westport Studios. Views and opinions expressed by guests on My Sales Day are their own and may not reflect the views and opinions of their organization. Start your sales day the right way with My Sales Day. I'll see you in our next episode and in the daily newsletter.